What's going on, guys? Had to be back here. The release of Pokemon Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon are right around the corner, and I am pumped to give Alola another bit of exploration. But like I said almost a year ago, Jesus, Pokemon is a series near and dear to my heart. And in the wake of the next major installment, I want to go through the previous generations and take a look back on each of these games, both in the core mechanics of the game and my personal experiences. Slight disclaimer, I'm only going to look at the main series games, no Mystery Dungeon or console-based games. I love the series, but that didn't mean I had the urge to get any of the Mystery Dungeon games, and console Pokemon like Stadium, Gale of Darkness, etc. I never had much experience with, besides with friends, because I never owned many Nintendo consoles after the SNES until about the Wii. But anywho, let's start out this little series by looking at the generation that kicked off the worldwide phenomenon. Generation 1 Pokemon Red, Blue, and Yellow. Let's rewind a bit, way back to one of the earliest Christmases I can remember. Can't quite remember my age, my early childhood was a roller coaster ride, so to speak, but that's for another time. My big gift I got that year was a brand new Game Boy. My younger self was pumped. My eldest sister had one that she never really played, so I snuck some time on it, but this was mine and mine alone. And the first game I got to play on it the same day was Pokemon Blue. I say first one played because I never actually owned Pokemon Blue first. My parents had enough to get me the Game Boy, but due to my age, wanted to make sure I get the most out of my new best friend before wasting more money on games for it. So, wrapped up for that Christmas was a Blockbuster rental case with Pokemon Blue inside. And you want to know something? It was awesome! Whoever played that cartridge last had a level 100 Snorlax and a Porygon in their party, and just seeing these creatures immediately caught my attention, and I dicked around for a while until I had to take the game back. Shortly afterwards, noticing I had actually enjoyed my time with the game, and had at the very least some understanding on how to play it, my parents went ahead and got me my own fresh copy from the store, Pokemon Red, which I'm amazed I still have managed to hold on to after all this time. So, now that that nostalgia trip is done, let's actually get into the game. So, Pokemon Generation 1 has you taking control of Red, an 11-year-old boy living in Pallet Town in the Kanto region. Sick of being restricted to the 3-building town, you decide to rebel and venture out of town. Sensing you're leaving through psychic powers he will constantly use against you, Professor Oak stops you, telling you it's dangerous to go out alone, and takes you back to his lab. Waiting there is Oak's grandson, Blue. It is there that every long-running Pokemon fan has had to make the toughest decision in the world. Oak offers you one of 3 Pokemon to take along with you as a means of protecting yourself, but to also take along as a new friend and partner, those 3 Pokemon being Bulbasaur, Squirtle, or Charmander. After picking one and after getting immediately ambushed by Blue, you are tasked by Oak to go out and explore the entirety of Kanto and capture and record every Pokemon in the Pokedex, and to take on the Pokemon Challenge by going to every gym in the region to collect their badges and take on the Pokemon League. So you then head out to do just that. Catch every wild Pokemon you meet, battle gym leaders in the ultimate test of skill, as well as knock around your douche rival, put a stop to the criminal organization known as Team Rocket, and become the best like no one ever was. I think it goes without saying that this plot isn't going to win awards in complexity, but it didn't need to, at least not at the time. What is there, though, is a good enough plot to let kids project themselves into the shoes of Red and imagine that it's actually you roaming the Kanto region with all your new friends in tow. What's neat about it, though, is that while the plot remains the same no matter what, the adventure is almost always different depending on your starter Pokemon, the team you eventually build, how much work you put into said Pokemon, and plain old RNG. For example, the way I usually play now is way different to how I played my first time. My first time, if you can believe it, I played it almost exclusively with Charmander. See, I didn't care about which Pokemon would be better to use or stats or whatever. As a kid, I went towards what looked cool, and a fire lizard is never not cool. And it even evolves into a dragon. I mean, not dragon, I guess. Because of that, I slogged through the early game, as you can obviously expect, since Brock completely decimates Charmander, and Misty is almost just as hard. But I didn't care. Charmander was my pal, and I was getting through the game with him as much as I can. I obviously had to rely on some others as well, but by the end of the game, Charizard was a buffed up beefcake, capable of destroying all in his path. In order to do so, though, there was the actual gameplay I had to conquer over. A lot of older RPGs had characters with attacks that could be effective against certain enemies. Well, Pokemon takes that and completely revamps that idea, making it its core gameplay. Every Pokemon has a type, or maybe two, and every move is corresponded by its type.
But first you gotta know about the different types: grass, fire, ground, flame, electric, water, rock, flying, ice, normal, bug, ghost, fighting, and dragon. Don't forget about psychics!
Every typing has strengths and weaknesses, and your goal is to pick the move that will do the most damage. After taking out other Pokemon, yours will gain experience, and when it gains enough, they'll level up, earning better stats, potentially learn new moves, and depending on the type of Pokemon, could evolve into a more powerful version of itself, although some had special conditions to evolve. These new evolutions ranged from awesome to meh, but that didn't matter, for the most part. A lot of the original Pokemon's designs were really good, although some were either conceptually lazy, or, in Gen 1's case, not displayed very well on the Game Boy. But for the time, these were fine. At the very least, they were easy to laugh at. The anime and later generations fixed how they looked, so it's just nice to take a little trip back to see what their original designs were like. And in order to obtain, at least the vast majority of these Pokemon, you had to capture them in Pokeballs. When encountering wild Pokemon, you can throw different kinds of Pokeballs in hopes of capturing them. You can improve your odds by damaging them or by inflicting status ailments on them. That is, unless you have a Master Ball, which can catch anything. Like a Parasect, because young me never knew about Mewtwo my first time playing through the game. Now, while you are going around the Kanto region, you are accompanied by what might be some of the best 8-bit songs to have ever graced this earth. Pallet Town, Route 1, Vermilion City, the bicycle theme, etc., etc. It's all great. But what is my personal favorite, which is also kind of unfortunate because you'll only hear it once throughout your first playthrough, is the Champion Final Fight theme. This track on a Game Boy gets you all kinds of fired up, and I'll be honest, when they remade this song for the Game Boy Advance, I found it the weaker of the two songs. What's nice about going through the region, though, is that, to a slight extent, you actually have a fair bit of freedom to do what you want in this generation. Unless you're glitching the game, you always have to face Brock first, and usually Misty next, and you'll always have to face Giovanni last, but everything else in the middle can be done based on what you want to do, in whatever order you want. The game suggests where you should go, but Especially with a lot of RPGs at this time, it was nice to just go about the adventure how you want to. Besides Gen 2 to an extent, this was the only generation that let you have that kind of freedom, and unlike a lot of other RPGs at the time, the game never made it difficult to know where to go and what to do to progress at any point in the story. A staple throughout the series is, of course, your rival, and Blue in this game is a pretty good rival, morally a good person, just a bit of a prick, and he does go through a small amount of character development, even if it all shatters by the end of the game. I wouldn't say he's the best rival, just a fun one. Before continuing, Blue and Red were the first versions to come out, but there was a later special version released which was Pokemon Yellow, and before I go on, I'll just talk about the minor differences between the versions. Each version has different Pokemon that can be discovered in the wild, encouraging friends to trade with each other. Yellow version is made to coincide with the anime, so it has your starter be a Pikachu that follows you around, and Blue having an Eevee that adjusts its evolutions based on how hard you wreck them. Yellow also allows the opportunity to get all the starters in one session to mimic the anime. You also fight Jesse and James at certain points instead of just a plain Team Rocket grunt, but that's kinda it. Now, despite the legacy this game has garnered, Generation 1 isn't the masterpiece people tend to think it is. Its reputation is legendary. The game has some flaws though. Firstly, while minor in comparison to a lot of other issues many other games have had, this is still something to ponder. The AI isn't the smartest around. Not brain dead, mind you, just not smart. The most famous thing it does is use moves that would be super effective against you as priority, even if the move is non-damaging. Lance's Dragonair is probably the worst offender, which speedrunners tend to take advantage of. But now there's two big things that hurt this game. One is something that later gens also have a problem with, and one is fairly unique to this one. The one similar problem is HMs. I'm sure everyone ever has endured this problem, but I'll address it again. HMs are moves that you can teach your Pokemon that can affect the overworld in various ways, like swimming on water, cutting trees, boulders, etc. They're extremely picky to get rid of though, and it makes it hard to teach Pokemon because it'll take up a slot. Surf and Fly are fine moves to teach Pokemon on your main squad. However, the most notoriously bad usage of one is Cut in Vermilion City. You need the HM to get into the gym, and Cut as an attacking move is awful, and that means you either need to force a main party member to use up one of its 4 moves a Pokemon can learn to have Cut, essentially wasting a spot, or use it on an HM slave and take it with you to the gym, using one of your 6 Pokemon spots, essentially handicapping you. Strength is also required for Victory Road, but people seem to like that move. I hate Strength. If I'm using a normal type move, I'll use Slash. But speaking of Victory Road, that brings up my other bad point. This game suffers in the late game with a massive level spike. You finish with the final gym, and just before entering Victory Road, Blue ambushes you and you fight him. This fight is a pretty good way to test your skills. Blue, as long as you don't skim out on battles, has some strong Pokemon, but nothing too overwhelming. Then you make your way through Victory Road. No trainers along the way, and wild Pokemon that supply minimal experience, only to encounter the Elite Four, your final test. And while Lueroi and Bruno don't pose too much of a threat, it's the rest that causes problems. Even with the experience earned by them, Agatha and Lance, at least when I play, usually have Pokemon that are around 4 or 5 levels higher at the very least, sometimes higher depending on who I use on my team. Then we fight Blue, and while his theme keeps my spirit up during the fight, that boy was stuffing rare candy somewheres because his Pokemon has jumped between 9 to 15 levels since you fought him just a few minutes ago at the start of Victory Road. This forces grinding, and grinding sucks. Generation 1 has had an EXP share, but you're better off focusing on one Pokemon at a time. And even with a balanced team, you really have to come prepared, and also bring a lot of recovery items in order to just beat him out. All the time throughout the rest of the game is fine, but when you get to the end of the main game and you're forced to go back out and grind, I find it disheartens the player, at least in my case. But that doesn't completely destroy the ending. Heck, like I've said, the AI, not very smart. So there is workarounds. And with that, the first generation has been looked at. But next time we look at the series, we jump over a route or two to the Johto region in Pokemon Gold, Silver, and Crystal. Until then, I'll see you guys later.